Hello. Mm. I love this. I love this part. Hello. A feast. Okay. You might take your time to look at your other yogis on the other pages. Takes time. No hurry. Oh boy, this is so wonderful. Mm. Mm. So Kay is helping us today. So thank you, Kay, it's really wonderful. Good to be with you. Good to see everybody. I don't know how karuna, compassion, has been going for you. And it seems very quick to shift to mudita, but of course, as I've been trying to offer, this is like a light touch, like a light brush stroke of each Brahma Vihara, and it doesn't mean that you can't do the love and kindness or the compassion, or also just do the Vipassana, even during the guided. So I have found it, I always find that having a week to do one of the Brahma Viharas as a flavor in our daily lives is also always kind of like putting battery cables on a car or something, like a battery, like it just kind of boosts the memory. It's like a memory boost of remembering to come back to that particular Brahma Vihara, even if it's just once a day, but it's meant to be a boost. And sometimes the shift from karuna to mudita, from compassion to empathetic joy, is intense. Sometimes it's a relief, a great relief. So we're shifting from finding the heart and abiding in that wishing well or friendliness or tenderness of heart with ourselves and all beings. Kindness, like sometimes it's just the simplicity of the kindness. And then the karuna or compassion is, again, very simply orienting our heart toward any kind of pain in the world, mental, emotional, physical, and connecting with it, connecting the attention with it, but not going into it that we drown, but stepping back a bit and then caring about the pain. And then the empathetic joy or mudita is orienting this heart, softness of heart, toward the joy in the world, the pleasantness, the joy, the beauty. Or it can be orienting toward appreciating wisdom or appreciating kindness, or it can orient towards the spiritual qualities, the pleasant ones, or the neutral ones. So it's appreciating. And then sometimes it shifts into gratitude. And of course, next week will be upekkha or equanimity, but it's just always keeping in mind that the equanimity is the protection for the first three. It's the guard. It's what keeps these first three in balance. It's what allows them to be without conditions, unconditional, rather than as a kind of control, which I try to go into with each Brahmavihara during the talk. So just because the experience isn't mudita, say for example, any kind of attached joy, overexuberance can appear, or jealousy, envy, that's all part of the practice. It's all part of the purification that can happen as we do them. So if that happens or anything difficult comes up, of course, it's possible then to shift back to compassion or metta or vipassana. And all it means is that it isn't unconditional. That's all. So with mudita, it's really usually helpful to start with pure vipassana and to get into the receptive awareness. If we're not able to receive, it's hard to appreciate or be grateful. It's usually a memory that it's based on rather than the present moment. So that receiving non-conceptually is a way to jump in. So we'll jump in with hearing. So it's that noticing that hearing is happening. Very simply. And just noticing if the attention can receive the textures, vibrations of any silence or sounds, subtle or intense. And of course, thoughts will come up about the sounds. So one just allows them, one receives them coming and going. No problem. And just returning to receiving directly, not through the thought process. And then as part of that process, one sees if you can sustain the attention through the series of textures and vibrations. So already there can be a beginning to feel mudita, appreciation, if we can even do that, just for a few seconds. So the levels of appreciation and gratitude are vast as you drop into this moment by moment, being with the sounds just as they are, as they change. So one level is appreciating that we can hear. And just notice how the attention can start abiding, just coming back into that appreciation. And it can be seamless. It can be just receiving the sound and appreciating hearing itself. And sometimes that kind of goes in to the heart, mind, deeper into gratitude for receiving sound. Yeah, abide in appreciation. And we can go to our hands, receive the physical sensations that are changing moment by moment. There's the visual image, the words, no problem, appreciating concept, and then receiving whatever textures, vibrations. Often we notice warmth or coolness, pressure, tingling, heaviness, tightness, softness, hardness, smooth, rough, numb. And oh my, the levels of appreciation that our hands still work somewhat or well. They can move or be still, touch, connect us to the world and ourselves. So we start to just drop into that sense of being able to say thank you. To our hand. We're grateful. And of course, I'm moving very quickly. One can just drop into that, just abiding in appreciation for a long time. And you start to receive the appreciation and receive the gratitude. So you can do this with every sense door: eyes, nose, smell, right? Thoughts, emotion, body sensation, sound. And you can open up that field as we did with the kindness from inside our heart to a very wide open field of awareness. It's moment to moment experience and abiding in appreciation for whatever appears and disappears. Or just stay with one sense door. Or you might find during the sitting, you find a rhythm with both. Abiding in appreciation or gratitude. was hoping that as you continued with the guided meditation, because I don't feel like it's good to speak the whole uh, session, the next place we would have gone would be the breath, and then the body, right, etc., thoughts, emotions. And I think that shift to the breath can be very interesting, especially for those of us who the breath was challenging in our practice as an anchor. I think that when you have that mudita flavor with the Vipassana and you shift to the breath, there's a way in which it can just be a kind of deep gratitude for being alive. You know, that like you still have one breath coming, right? It's just that closeness to the wisdom of our mortality and the fleetingness of life, but also this deep appreciation. And of course, one cannot address this enough, the sense of appreciating that we can see. And especially as we get older and our sense doors diminish, you know, we can really appreciate that we can still think well, right? Relatively well, or maybe not, but we still can walk. Or there's levels to which I think that as you get older, there is a way that this practice is also very much can deepen our appreciation for what we have left. It's still working. And if you have done these practices with phrases in the past, I just wanted to mention that this style of practice, you don't necessarily have to go through retranslating the phrases so that you are having unconditional acceptance of things as they are. So for example, the mudita phrase that I was given was, may your happiness and success never end. That's the traditional phrase. And you know, like by the time you get to never end, I'd be like, the way I would say it is, may your happiness and success never end. What do you mean? Of course it's going to end, right? Like it would just be like this battle with the what the phrase said, and actually like having to work with getting the equanimity in it. And it was like that with the compassion phrase, may you be free from suffering. And it's like, well, yeah, you do it, and at some point your brain just kind of, and your heart just rebel and goes, well, wait a minute, you know, of course there's going to be suffering, right? So there's this level where with the mudita, I'll stick with that, but that this way of practicing, you don't have to go through that process of accepting that it does end with each phrase, right? You still have to accept that, you know, beauty ends, right? And that pleasant ends, and that this whole way of how we relate to Vedana, it gets so, our relationship to Vedana gets very intensified as we do these practices, because they're putting us right on that edge of, are we accepting that pain exists, or that pleasure exists, but it changes, right? Like it's just like these practices, especially if you do them in this style, it is a way that I believe the equanimity ripens with it less like a roller coaster. And you start to see that, you start to understand that loving kindness is only loving kindness if it's unconditional. And you see that compassion is only compassionate if it's without conditions. And mudita is only mudita when it's unconditional. And it's the equanimity that's why it's called a protector. That's what allows that to happen at times. So of course when we offer these teachings, it's just again and again to remind you that it doesn't, if attached joy or envy or jealousy appears, or often the unworthiness, all these aspects of that happen with mudita, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It will mean that you're doing the practice right. So if they get more available and appear more, that means that the purification is happening. Yay. This is a poem by Saigyo. He was born in 1118 in Japan, and he died in 1190. Beyond this life and this world, I'll have it till my heart's content. The bright moon that passed over the horizon before I had my fill. This one takes time, but it's pretty amazing. Beyond this life and this world, I'll have it till my heart's content. The bright moon that passed over the horizon before I had my fill. It's awesome. I mean, it's just like here, you just picture like, bathing in this moonlight, right? Just like bathing in the night with the moonlight, and this incredible contentment and connection, right? And that even beyond this life and this world, that this is so powerful. The contentment is complete. And yet, he says he hasn't had his fill, like that it's passed over. There's this contradiction in it, and it's like perfect mudita. Yeah, it's like this being up against this incredible pleasure and joy, and the contentment. But it's not just being with that, right? It passed. And he didn't have his fill. Because you can never have your fill because it's impermanent, right? And yet he said in his beyond this life, beyond this world, he'll always have it. Wow, that's so accepting of the paradox, right? Wow, I just think that's such an amazing poem. I haven't read it ever because I think it takes time to even take it in, and I'd rather stay with it and move on, but here we are. There is a Saigyo poem I probably read too much, but I can't help it, because he's so good at expressing this range of joy and sorrow and pleasure and pain and how to be with it, with understanding impermanence. A world without the scattering of blossoms, without the clouding over of the moon, would deprive me of my melancholy. I mean, how much do we relate to melancholy that way, yeah? And that, like, this is it. This is mudita. This is unconditional, right? Unconditional mean it includes everything. It's not just conditional in that we'll only have mudita if the moon is there and doesn't set. Or if melancholy doesn't appear ever again if we're with it. Right, all that. It's like not only is he saying, there's anicca, there's impermanence, but he doesn't want to be deprived of the melancholy that comes with anicca. So I'm trying to lay the ground for the unconditional, right? That it includes, the mudita can be for everything. In my early years of practice, when I was trying to understand, when it would be like going my way, there'd be some mindfulness, right? Some energy, some concentration, and it would feel like that was good practice, right? It's when we feel like that's good practice. And then the purification would hit, the energy would go down, and I'd have something that I couldn't be with, and I didn't want to be with, and I thought it should go away, or should have gone away. And I started to see the relationship between having enough of the good stuff to be able to bear the pain, or to have the courage to be with the pain. And I think the mudita is so critical for this, for us all. It's like, I just want to say, especially these times, if you're like getting a little blown away by these times that we're in, that without like really having, I think, a practice of making sure that you're having enough mudita. Like, sometimes it's just gonna be like you're cut into little ribbons and you don't want to do it, but you gotta. Because if you don't keep the strength up, if you don't keep the courage up, if you don't let yourself, of course, feel the pain, but then find a way to not drown. That it's just that balance of the effortlessness and the ease and the calm and the tranquility, right? All that good stuff. And then when the purification hits, nowadays there's so much pain that we're confronted with, and so much unnecessary pain, so much unnecessary suffering, that to I think of it as a spiritual duty to get enough mudita. Because one of us drowning and not having any more courage left and enough strength left to hold, just to hold, it doesn't help anything. It doesn't mean that I'm not saying we don't drown at all. So I hope you're not hearing me say that. But I am saying that we have to understand this, that if we don't have enough of the pleasant and the beauty as a something to know that is possible, that is actually a reality, that the pain isn't the only reality, it's just inevitable that we drown. And okay, but one can find more balance in that if we work hard at it at times. It has been quite a time of caregiving and dukkha for me in my life, and trying to practice also what I teach. Important. And I wrote something. It's a little haiku yesterday, but it's like, um, so the drought, what I mean by the drought is the drought in this world that's happening. You know, that lack of, there's not enough metta happening in the world, but it's also that internal, not so much dukkha. And even in this drought, fluttering themselves about orange butterflies. So yesterday morning, I really took the time, right? Like to focus on these orange butterflies and just took the time. Yeah, took it. Because mudita takes time. And that's like, I think that what we think is like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna do mudita, right? And it's like, it's just not like that. It can't just, it's not like a command. It's not an army drill, the Brahma Viharas. It's something that we try to make time for every day, and it usually requires going through boredom. It usually requires like kind of going through a free fall because we're in the world of busyness or so much dukkha. And I think that, again, it's usually doesn't take much once you kind of go into neutral, at least for a bit. And maybe if you're in the north, you see a beautiful leaf. It doesn't look a red leaf, right? I remember in northern Maine in the winter homesteading, and everything would be frozen so long. And sometimes I just walked to this beaver dam that was pretty far away, snowshoe, far away. And I knew that right where the beaver had it dammed up, that the water still was trickling through somewhere deep underneath. And sometimes I felt like I would just like stand there until I could hear that water flowing, just like, oh yeah, there's something moving. There's life, right? It would be so frozen for so long. And that's how it can be for us sometimes. It's just like, where do you find that place that, from like in the Li Po poem, when he says, my heart serene in flowing water. If you've been going too long and then too long without finding that softening or the flowing, then it will take more time, but it's worth it. I get pretty clear feedback from the feral cats if I have been not attending to them at all, like it's a feedback system that I'm not taking the time. And there's this very neglected, dirty, like a old picnic table outside, and I think about every couple of days I'll have this thought, I should really clean that off. I should really wipe it down. Like I've probably been having it for years, that thought, right? Like, and I don't, it's too many other priorities, right? So I was going by it and I was like, and I could tell I'd just been doing too much for too long. And I thought, I don't need to clean this off to sit down. Why do I need to clean it off? And so I sat down on it. It's really dirty. I sat down on the top, not on the bench. And then it was amazing. Really, like this is what I find. Like I just sat there and of course went through that place of like, oh, I got to do this, this, and this, and this. And just like made myself go through it. Just that tension of like, oh, I don't have time for this. And yet if I don't, what is the price, right? And so I sat there. And then one of the cats, Christofferson, she is terrified of getting too close, right? And she just was amazed that I was there, right? That's her territory. I never go over there. And she came over and she went around the back of me and she went up on the bench in the back. And she looks the other way. I don't quite get that about cats, but they don't, like I'm looking one way, and they think intimacy is like getting up there and looking the other way. If anyone understands this, please let me know, because it's so bizarre. And then eventually the mother cat came along, and she's coming over. I love their expression. She's looking at me like, but you never do this, right? Like it's like this is new, and scared, right? Because change is scary for them. And then she eventually got up, not next to me, of course, but next to Christofferson, and turned around. So, I mean, it's like their idea of intimacy, right? That's it. This is it. And I kept turning around like, can't you just like look at me once, but no, of course they're not gonna. And I turn around and just, I stayed there as long as I felt like I was really gonna not be okay if I stayed um, any longer. But one of my favorite things that happen is that I often plant these things as experiments. So there's a plant on this planet called vetiver, and it's known to be like one of the plants that could save the planet. Like its roots purify toxins, it prevents erosion. I could go on and on about this incredible plant. So I planted it in this place, which happens to be what they were looking at. The cats were looking at it. And I didn't really pay attention, but then the mother cat jumped off the bench after a while, and she started smelling it, and she looked back at me this one time. It was like, I didn't know this was here. It was like she saw it for the first time, and it's like she just had the greatest time, like hanging out under it and, exploring it, and there it goes, right? This is mudita. This is appreciating joy, right? This is what happens, not just for human beings. This is about an elephant. The lone bather worshipped the Ganges river in her own way, not as a human suppliant, but as a creature born to water. One moment she frolicked in the sacred river, splashing and spraying herself with innocent delight. Then all at once she collapsed and let the stream wash over her, supine as a boulder, scoured and sculpted by the current. Born of water. And that's it. That's again. There's an aspect of this. This is, of course, in the Vipassana practice too. Like, how does joyful interest happen? But it's that willingness to be bored, right? It's the willingness to let ourselves shift out of being the doing and the busyness, and that it's a kind of renunciation. I feel it's a renunciation of our Homo sapien great talent for efficiency and great talent for doing, and being able to see that the renunciation of that is a form of kindness for ourselves and all beings, and that we know that expectation and agenda kills connection, right? We know it kills connection with our own heart, just that insidious way that we can expect something from the moment or have an agenda. And when the Buddha taught about the begging bowl, right, that as a way of life for the monks and nuns, the begging bowl, where you have this bowl that represents just enough, that you're going to beg for your food, and that you will receive just enough. And I don't think that mudita can really come any other way but through understanding this, that it's like the more that we don't shift into that humility of non-expectation and non-agenda, and just be, and are willing to go through the discomfort of that to this place where there's a worthiness in just allowing one breath, right? That we're worthy of that breath, that all beings are worthy of that breath. But it's because we're not slowing down and paying attention that we become more and more unworthy. And all the self-hatred. There's a great line from a Citizen Cope song where he says, "Hard times aren't hard to find." Hard times are not hard to find. There's nothing truer than that right now. And yet, if we don't find the heart of the child, the softness, like the elephant, the play, the splashing, and then the serenity of the surrender of just letting, it's like living out karma, letting it wash through, letting it wash through. There's no peace. This is from Rainer Maria Rilke, the great German poet, last century. You, darkness, that I come from, I love you more than all the fires that fence in the world. To love darkness that much. And so much of what is emphasized is the light. And I think that, of course, so much can be said about mudita, but I think that there's a whole many other talks around how as you go through that sense of appreciation and then the gratitude, that there really can come up a great reverence and a great respect as well as that. Like it's all part of that process that I feel, the worthiness that is so important in the mudita practice. So again, it might not be you hit that with the sound or sight, but if you just keep going with it, you might not direct it with the sense doors, but of course the 6 sense doors will appear. There's that sense of often with the breath, because it's so light and we're so dependent on it. We're so dependent on it, more than water or food. There can be that sense of reverence and respect. And I often will mention certain things to kind of change the channel, but I don't often talk about food. Sometimes I do, of course. When I had long COVID, I did talk about scones a lot in terms of how to get through. But I think tasting, the sense door of tasting, and then again, I get very busy and I don't take the time sometimes. I love to grow herbs, and I don't hardly pick them. And I've really been trying to shift a little and cut some herbs and then just cut a little cherry tomatoes and a few cucumbers and put it on. And it was like heaven. Mudita again. Mudita, mudita, mudita. So, of course, I will tend toward a cake rather than cucumbers and tomatoes when push comes to shove, if needing some mudita quick. But I just wanted to mention this because I think this is actually more healthy, and I'm capable of it. I love it, and I know we all have our ways of doing that, right? That we bring in mudita with the six sense doors. It can be a practice. You could take the next week and skip the equanimity and do a day on mudita with seeing, a day of mudita with thinking, a day of see, it's not hard. It might not be we remember all day. That's not what I'm saying. It might be a few times. It could be a meal with mudita. Lay people and lay practice and not being on retreat as lay people, it's not like you have to not be creative and find ways to do the mudita practice. But I would say if it's not an easy Brahma Vihara, it's hard. And then I think I just wanted to go into with these sense doors, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, thinking, which you include emotion with. What's wonderful about mudita and where it leads to so much liberation is that if you're focusing on the pleasant and then there's liking and enjoying, that also where the Buddha taught you can cut that chain, where you can get liberated, where you can cut the chain to Vedana, to that pleasant pain syndrome, that here it is with mudita. You get another chance of how to have an option with pleasantness, where you notice the pleasant and then you notice maybe liking, losing it a bit with the enjoying, and your awareness can pull out instead of drowning in the enjoyment, but it's like drowning in pain, right? And sadness and grief. We can drown in enjoyment, and one can pull out and appreciate. You can appreciate. That's how you cut addiction. That's how we cut clinging. So it's such an important tool. I might sound like I'm getting intense about like talking about it at this juncture, but I do feel like it's a practice. We start with metta, we do compassion, and then mudita often gets short shrift. But it's so important because the awareness being free, the awareness not getting imprisoned by the pleasant is very hard to heal, and that this like mudita is such an important practice to help us cut that addiction to pleasantness. I think that Basho was one of the most famous haiku masters from Japan and kind of came out into the world, translated in many places, fortunately. He came much later than Seigyo. So Seigyo isn't as well known, but here we are with Basho, and he was so essential in terms of valuing pilgrimage and valuing the hardship of pilgrimage and valuing the practice of haiku. He lived from 1425 to 6 in that era where there was a dark age of Japanese literature, and so he brought such an important love and talent of haiku. So he lived in, what we would call the 1600s. His earliest work is 1662, but that dark age had been happening already for a while. And I think it's important to reflect on that, actually. Like when we're living in an age that is getting darker, then it's important to find the people that could offer how they dealt with it. He said that he loved he loved and needed solitude. I am like a sick man, weary of society, he wrote. There was a time I wanted an official post, land of my own. Another time I would have liked to live in a monastery. Yet I wandered on, a cloud in the wind, wanting only to capture the beauty of flowers and birds. One of the ways that he would teach about the art of haiku, he said once, learn about a pine tree from a pine tree. Learn about a bamboo stalk from a bamboo stalk. But he virtually gave up all his possessions, like so that he could wander. It's again a kind of renunciation, but look what it led to. It led to this extraordinary connection with nature and again with life itself. And I think that not just valuing the good stuff and the beauty. He wrote about the hardship as well. It was kind of hard for me to move on from compassion because of what's going on in my life. And I remember one time sharing, or several times sharing in talks, that Aiken Roshi in Honolulu one time said to me, how old is Kuan Yin? He was giving me a koan. How old is Kuan Yin? But I told him I wasn't good at koans and that I wanted him to just tell me the answer. I was kind of disappointing. So he said, okay, how old are you, Michele? And I said, at the time, I think I was pretty young. So I got it. Oh, okay. I love it when people explain things like that to me when I don't get it. How old is Kuan Yin? Oh, you say your age. All of us, right? How old is Kuan Yin? You would just say your age. And sometimes as I'm going along lately, and that, Kuan Yin, that compassion's accessible, but once in a while I'll just joke around and say, where are you, Kuan Yin? The koan is, where is Kuan Yin? Where did she go? So I thought, how can I work with this? And I just decided to put Kleenex on the altar. So I have a few altars around the house, and I put Kleenex there as a way to honor the grief and honor the sadness. And it feels like, when I look, it brings me such joy. It brings me so much joy to see that I can honor that in that way. It's like it feels like there's Kuan Yin right in the Kleenex. Where did she go? She's right there in the Kleenex. It's great. That's the creativity I feel like is so important in our lives. Where's Kuan Yin? I suppose one of the greatest haiku masters is Kobayashi Isa. In fact, they say that when you're a child in Japan, you learn to memorize a lot of his poems. It's like he's so beloved there. And it's amazing when you think about, I'd say of anyone I've ever read about, he suffered the most. I mean, he had so much suffering. I couldn't even bear to read it to you, like how much he suffered from such an early age. So many children, his children died. Never mind being tortured by a stepmother from a young age. Just horrible. And but I did decide, can I find it? He had such a good sense of humor about it. He said, when he was young and started writing, he said, "My home is so poor, even the resident flies keep their family small." Isn't that great? My home is so poor, even the resident flies keep their family small. We could do as good as that, huh? And I thought of this poem as we were doing the mudita guided, and that shift to the breath of that kind of field of just appreciation, gratitude. And when you drop into the breath and have that field, I think that he doesn't write about it in the way that we can actually feel it in the way we can. But he wrote, "My tired legs spread comfortably overhead a few passing clouds." And I hope you're getting the sense, like to me, this is the essence of how mudita is not about an intense experience of pleasantness or beauty. It's often a sense of like dropping in and having that flavor of rest, like the rest of like sitting on the picnic table with the cats, just like it's a kind of dropping in, very simple. My tired legs spread comfortably overhead a few passing clouds. So again, it's including anicca, right? It's not negating anicca, impermanence at all. It's a soft anicca in this case. But there's a peace, right? All conditioned things. Conditioned, right? Unconditioned, conditioned. All conditioned things are arising and passing. Understanding this brings the greatest kind of happiness, which is peace. The clouds are just a few clouds are passing overhead. There is great wisdom. There's contentment. There's kindness. There's metta, yeah. His legs are tired. There's compassion. And there's great rest. After the great winds on August 8th, the great fire in Lahaina, and the small fire near my house, I went for a walk in my neighborhood, and one of the people I see, she started telling me about this huge cactus that had lost a lot of its arms during that storm. And I mentioned this at some talk way back when I first got home from New Mexico, but she was grieving this loss of all these arms. but I could see she didn't have any time to do anything about it. And I felt like it was such a huge disaster in Hawaii, the storm and what happened in Lahaina particularly. And for some reason, I kept walking down to this plant. It's downhill, kind of hard on my body to walk back up and down that area. And I would take an arm, a big arm. I'd take an arm and bring it home. And I was like hoping the neighbors didn't think I was like, really being weird. But there's a word that kept coming up in my mind, which is recompense. I just felt like I had to do something in response to such a vast tragedy. So I started for 6 days in a row. I carried these big arms, and it's hard on my body still to do stuff like that. And I'd have to get a big bucket, and oh my goodness! And so here's these 6 arms in my yard, and one flowered this morning. And I feel like this is what I mean by doing something that might not make a lot of sense, but that feels right. Like maybe I'll get to give one of these plants to this neighbor who said she was so upset about this, right? But I think it's like we're all very individual in how we set something against something so awful. For me again, there's so much dukkha, and there's 2 of the 3 feral cats that really like catnip. Like they really like catnip. And I haven't had time to plant any for years, but then I also couldn't find any catnip seeds. So I was in the hardware store about 6 months ago, and there were 2 kind of seed packets that aren't catnip. But one is grass. I don't know, for you cat people, there's like grass that you can grow, and then there's cat mint. And it's not that long ago, I don't know, maybe a month ago, I decided, well, okay, there's no catnip, I'll just try these. And I really thought this was so exciting, and I thought the cats would just go after this grass and we'd live happily ever after, right? And they have so no interest in it. They look at me like, why did you even plant this? Like I have it in little pots outside, and they look at me like, Michelle, did you ever think about that? Like there's grass everywhere outside, and we're actually not indoor cats. And like, why would we be even, why would we eat this? It's like everywhere. Like they give me this look like, wow, you've really lost the plot. But I just went out this morning and I'm like, I cut it and I sprinkled it and I thought maybe they go. And then the catnip's coming up a little bit, but who knows? But I found catnip seeds a little while ago. Finally got them in, and there's a couple coming up. Now all I can say is that when you plant a seed in the ground and it's under in the darkness and you put earth over it, it's such an act of faith, yeah? And that's how mudita is. That's how the practice of mudita is. I'm not sugarcoating it. Especially in times like we're in. And yet, it's so important. And I lean into the old ancient poets in times like we're in because they live through times like we're in. And especially Wang An-shi, who lived 1021 to 1086, who worked his whole life progressively, super progressively, and really lost everything. And his poems are so extraordinary. So this is just one poem. I have read a lot, but I just feel like it's so important. So he hasn't slept all night. Dawn lights up the room. I close my book and sleep, dreaming of Bell Mountain and full of tenderness. How do you grow old, living with failure and disgrace? Stay close to the cascading creek, cold, shimmering. My heart serene on flowing water. Stay close. What? Keep it close. Keep it close. What am I saying to keep close? Keep the Brahma Viharas close. Stay close to the cascading creek. Stay close to the mindfulness practice. Stay close, keep it close. And that is a form of mudita practice. It's a form of respect and reverence for wisdom, for love. Let's sit just for a few minutes. Hard times aren't hard to find. So we have to keep our strength up, our spiritual strength up. And that's through these Brahma Viharas. Here we go this week with the mudita practice. Like it or not, we switched. And if you don't like it, you can switch back. So no pressure. No pressure. Have a good week.